Infor Track employee setup. The combination of selections entered on the employee record defines all aspects of how an employee's hours will flow through TimeTrack. To open the employees form, select the employees icon from the administrator homepage. The employee form is comprised of 3 tabs: the General tab, Contact Information, and Absences. The General tab specifies all the employee's configuration information. The primary function of the Contact Information tab is to indicate hire date and, where applicable, the employee's termination date. The Absences tab is used to specify absence tracking group and effective dates. To create an employee record, select the new icon, then enter the employee number, job title, and name. The badge ID defaults to the employee number, but an alternate value may be entered if the employee is to be assigned a badge with a different value. Payroll ID may be left blank if the payroll extract is to use the employee number. If the extract is to use a different code, specify that code in the payroll ID field to refer to the employee in payroll extracts. Set active to yes to allow the employee to enter hours and to display the employee's activity in queries that are run for report dates after the employee's hire date and before their termination date. Queries that are run on active employees for report dates prior to the employee's hire date or after their termination date will omit the employee records from display. This includes employee validation queries run on transaction forms, so an active employee will not be able to enter hours prior to their hire date or after their termination date. When active is set to no, they will not appear in any query, regardless of the report dates. PIN and PIN required are only active when PIN required is set to yes on the global parameters form. A PIN number is then used to sign into the application as a generic user. For CSI integrations, when the user initials are left blank, all transactions posted into the ERP will use a pre-established value which indicates that the transaction originates in Factory Track. We then have a series of required fields: facility, department, workgroup, employee type, and shift. Key a valid entry or select one from the fields pull-down menu for each of these fields. If shift patterns have been created, key a valid entry or select one from the fields pull-down menu. When the employee should book gap time to an indirect task other than the task specified for their employee type, specify the alternate indirect task here. When this field is blank, the gap utility will use the employee type indirect task. When there is a task specified, the gap utility will use the task specified on the employee record. The ERP cost component only applies to Infor LN integrations. Specified value will post to LN on project and service order types. Set workset enable to yes to allow employees to work on multiple jobs at the same time. Employee-specific privileges are defined in the kiosk access section. Select a username to associate the employee record with the user profile. This gives the employee named access to TimeTrack. When this field is left blank, the employee will access TimeTrack through a console user profile. When the employee predominantly books to a particular order type, set the default order type to default to that order type in the transaction forms. In CSI integrations, default resource group and default resource may be specified. When a default is specified, the resource group and resource will default into the TimeTrack transaction forms. Otherwise, the employee will manually enter these values. Set attendance to yes to enable the employee to clock in and out as a named user or as a console user. Set labor to yes to enable the employee to enter labor transactions as a named user or a console user. Set absence request to yes to enable the employee to submit absence requests as a named user or a console user. For named users, this parameter also allows them to create planned absences for themselves. By default, employees are not allowed to edit labor time. Set edit labor to yes to enable both named and console employees to edit their hours. Set edit absences to yes to allow employees to withdraw absence requests that have not yet been approved. Report and move quantity is a CSI parameter. Set it to yes to allow the employee to report or move quantities. When it is set to no, quantity complete and move fields will not display on the TimeTrack transaction forms. Move to inventory is also a CSI parameter. Set it to yes to allow the employee to move quantities on the last operation to inventory. When set to no, the move field will not display on last operations on TimeTrack transaction forms. On the Contact Information tab, the only required field is the hire date. Hours are not allowed to be entered for report dates prior to the hire date, and no employee activity will be displayed for dates prior to the hire date. Termination date is the opposite of hire dates. Hours are not allowed to be entered for report dates after the termination date, and no employee activity will be displayed for dates after the termination date. Several name and address fields are present, but since these fields are not privacy compliant, their use is limited. The email address field is used by the absence request system to notify employees when their supervisor approves or denies their requests. The Absences tab displays configuration information pertinent to the tracking of the employee's absence hours. The first subcollection on the left margin of the tab is the time off group subcollection. This subcollection displays the absence code in the employee's time off group, along with their current balances, the annual allowed balances, and the annual allowed overrides that have been specified for this employee. The balances displayed will be the balances of the tracking year selected in the tracking year subcollection on the right-hand side. To specify an annual allowed override for a code in the employee's time off, enter the desired annual allowed in the hours override field. When the edit is saved, the annual allowed balance will be updated to the annual allowed override value, and the available balance will be recalculated to reflect the override. The format for the hours override field is hours and minutes. When an override is entered, it is listed in the hours allowed override history subcollection. The record indicates the absence code and tracking the override is for, displays the resulting adjustment and adjusted annual allowed balance the override created, and the user and date the override was performed by is also displayed. The tracking year subcollection on the right margin of the form drives most of the information on this tab. This subcollection displays the time off group ID and the effective date for each tracking year the employee has been employed for. Select a record in this subcollection to display the relevant absence tracking information for that tracking year. New tracking years may be added manually or via the Create New Tracking Year utility. To enter a new tracking year manually, focus in the subcollection, select the new icon, then enter the tracking year, time off group ID, and effective date of the tracking year. When the Create New Tracking Year utility is used, the new tracking year record will be created using the time off group ID from the previous year and will increment the year in the effective date of the prior year by 1. Above the tracking year subcollection is the tracking year field. The value in this field will default to the tracking year specified on the facility form. The value displayed will affect the corresponding tracking year in the tracking year subcollection. Next to tracking year is the perfect attendance field. When the attendance points system is active, the employee's level and total points are displayed for the default track of the tracking year selected. When the attendance point system is not active, the level will display as perfect and the points total as 0. Below the tracking year subcollection are links to the time off request form and the view tracked absences form. The time off request form is a non-touch screen the supervisor may use to create an absence request for an employee or to approve a requested absence. View tracked absences provides additional detail on available balances and displays absence activity history. When the attendance point system is active, this form is used to process corrective actions.